Christmas feels safe until you learn about the people who never made it to Christmas morning. Every year, terrifying things happen in the dark, and tonight, I'm going to show you what really hides behind the holiday cheer. But before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed true horror stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The snow outside thickened as the night dragged on, and the wind seemed to carry whispers not meant for human ears. Rachel hugged Lily tighter, feeling the girl's small body shivering against her. Ben pressed himself against Mark, his wide eyes glinting in the faint glow of the dying fire. Every creak of the cabin, every groan of the wood under the snow's weight made their hearts jump. It started subtly at first. Soft thumps against the windows, barely audible like someone tapping their fingers, but in a rhythm, deliberate. Mark rose to check, flashlight in hand, but as soon as he approached the living room window, the beam revealed nothing but the endless snow. Then came the shadows. Rachel thought she saw figures moving outside, standing just beyond the tree line. They weren't humans, too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Every time she blinked, they disappeared. The snowman's presence felt heavier now, as if it had grown taller while they weren't looking. Its coal eyes seemed to pierce through the cabin walls, following every movement. And sometimes, when Rachel looked carefully, she swore it wasn't alone. Shapes in the snow, smaller than it, but moving like puppets, twisted and writhed as though alive. By 1 a.m., panic had set in. The children clung to them, whispering about faces at the windows, shadows crawling across the walls, and scratching at doors that weren't there a moment ago. Rachel's phone, when she finally dared to try it, still had no signal. Mark tried reasoning, tried rational explanations, but the evidence of terror pressed too close. The footprints outside were multiplying, large, inhuman prints leading in circles around the cabin, as if the snowman, or whatever it was pacing, planning. Then came the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, close, like someone was standing just behind them. Mark spun around, flashlight swinging wildly, illuminating nothing but the dark corners of the room. The children screamed, and Rachel felt herself frozen in place, the icy grip of dread crawling over her skin. The shadows moved again, stretching across the ceiling, reaching down, as if the walls themselves were bending toward them. At one point, Lily pointed to the tree, trembling. Rachel followed her gaze and gasped. Ornaments were swinging violently, though the air inside the cabin was still. Lights flickered, forming patterns that made no sense, like symbols or words. And then they heard it, a low, guttural whisper repeating their names, broken, echoing, warped. Rachel's stomach churned as she realized the whisper wasn't coming from the fire, the walls, or outside. It was inside. They tried to barricade themselves in the bedroom, piling furniture against the door, but the scratching at the wood continued, louder, faster, desperate. Something was trying to get in. Something not human. Ben cried out that he could see a hand pressing through the wall, black and long-fingered. Rachel held him, shaking, whispering that it was just the wind, but even she didn't believe it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt suspended. The children slept fitfully, clutching each other, but the shadows never left. Rachel noticed the snowman had moved again, this time closer, visible through the thin layer of snow on the cabin roof. It leaned toward them, impossibly tall, eyes glowing faintly in the weak moonlight. Its thick arms twisted, scraping against the cabin siding. And now the whispers weren't just calling names, they were laughing. Hundreds of voices echoing, chanting, cruel and distorted. Mark made a decision. They had to leave. He bundled the children into coats, grabbed flashlights, and prepared to dash into the snow. But the world outside had changed. The snow was deep, thick, forming unnatural mounds. Tracks that didn't belong to any animal, wide, human-like, yet grotesque, led from the tree line straight toward the cabin. Rachel saw them move, slow, deliberate, almost stalking. And then the snowman moved again, faster this time, gliding unnaturally over the snow. As they stepped outside, the wind carried something horrible, a sound like hundreds of footsteps running across ice, converging toward them. Shadows flickered in every direction, forming shapes that looked like human faces, twisted and screaming. Rachel felt something brush against her shoulder, cold, solid, sticky like frozen flesh. She spun around and saw nothing, but the footprints told another story. There had been hundreds now, all converging on the cabin from every direction. The snowman stopped a few feet away from them. Its thick arms lifted slowly, as if measuring them, testing them. Rachel noticed its mouth had moved, not words this time, just an imitation of screaming, as if it had consumed voices before and was practicing. Lily clung to her mother, whispering, "Mom, it's going to take us." Mark tried to push them forward, but the snow seemed to resist their steps. It wasn't just snow, it was thick, almost alive, sucking at their boots. Every step forward was agony. And then came the scream. Not the children's, not theirs. It was a sound like metal tearing, echoing from the woods behind them. The snowman tilted his head, mimicking it perfectly. Rachel realized with a cold certainty that whatever created the snowman was no ordinary force. It was intelligent. It watched. It waited. It thrived on terror. And now it had them. They ran blindly, snow flying around them, the wind carrying whispers, laughter, and the scraping of stick arms across the frozen earth. The snowman almost caught them at the edge of the woods, but Rachel pushed them forward. Mark felt his hand grabbed by a cold tendril, grabbing at him. But somehow he broke free, pulling the children with him. They ran blindly until they could no longer hear the whispers. By dawn, the snow had stopped falling, but the landscape had changed. Trees were bent unnaturally. Snow drifted in impossible angles, and the forest seemed alive. The footprints led away from the cabin into the heart of the woods, and in the clearing behind them, just at the edge of vision, the snowman stood, not alone. Smaller shapes writhed around it, still mimicking voices, laughing and stretching toward the sky. No one ever found Rachel, Mark, Lily, or Ben. Search parties came, but the cabin was empty and the snow had melted, erasing tracks. Only the legend remained. Whispers from locals that a snowman had claimed a family one Christmas, that it watched from the woods, waiting for the next foolish soul seeking solitude. Some said if you walked in the forest on a snowy Christmas Eve, you could hear laughter carried on the wind and see the shadows of figures too tall, too thin, and horribly wrong, moving just beyond the tree line. Even now, every year, the story returns. Travelers disappear. Children wake screaming, claiming a snowman called their name outside. The snow falls heavier than normal in that region, and the wind carries something strange. Whispers, voices, and the unmistakable sound of scraping stick arms across the frozen earth. And the snowman? It waits, always watching, always moving.
The Johnson family's Christmas had started innocently enough. They spent the afternoon decorating the house, laughing and sipping hot chocolate. Outside, snow fell in thick, quiet drifts, covering the neighborhood in a soft, white blanket. But the old Victorian home had always held its secrets. Emma had often felt a chill in the attic, even in summer. Tonight, however, it wasn't just a chill. It was an oppressive weight, a silent warning she could not ignore. Emma hesitated at the attic ladder, staring at the single bulb swinging from the ceiling. The bulb flickered faintly, as if warning her to turn back. But her mother had asked her to fetch the decorations, and Emma reluctantly climbed, the steps creaking under her weight. Dust coated the floor, and the boxes were scattered in disarray. The smell of old pine and mothballs filled her nostrils. But beneath it, something else lingered, a metallic, coppery scent that made her stomach turn. She reached for the first box. Ornaments from decades past, faded and cracked, spilled onto the floor. Then she noticed the new ones, bright, shiny baubles that hadn't been there before, strung along a cord that seemed impossibly thin and long. As she moved closer, the reflection in one ornament made her pause. Her face stared back at her, but twisted, hollow, lips curled in a grin she hadn't made. Her skin seemed pale and sickly in the reflection, and her eyes, they were black, like coal. A soft creak echoed behind her. She spun, heart racing. The attic door, which she remembered leaving open, was now shut. Her fingers trembled as she touched the box again, and the figurines inside moved. One raised its arm slightly, tilting its head, its tiny eyes glinting. She recoiled, knocking a small porcelain boy to the floor. It didn't shatter. It rolled, then stopped, upright, staring. Emma tried to scream, but no sound came. The laughter began then, high-pitched, childlike, yet hollow. It bounced off the walls, echoing in every corner of the attic. The shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting along the walls and ceiling. She backed toward the ladder, fumbling in terror. One figurine moved closer on its own, crawling across the floor, porcelain fingers tapping against the boards. When she reached the ladder, it felt longer than it had ever been. Each rung seemed to stretch away from her. She grabbed the railing and climbed, hearing the whispers grow louder. "Join us, join us." By the time she reached the living room, the house itself had changed. The hallway extended unnaturally, shadows pooling in corners. Her parents were downstairs wrapping presents, but their movements seemed jerky, puppet-like. She tried to call out, but her voice sounded distorted, bouncing back at her in eerie echoes. The Christmas tree lights flickered, casting shadows that moved independently of the ornaments. Her heart thudding as she realized the figurines were no longer in the attic. They were scattered across the living room, inching closer with slow, deliberate movements. Each one's face was hollow and grinning, their tiny eyes following her every move. One lifted its tiny hand toward her, cracked porcelain revealing a hollow, black void inside. She ran to the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her throat. The figurines multiplied, crawling over furniture, scaling chairs, climbing tables. Their whispered chants grew louder. "Join us, join us, join us." Emma scrambled to the staircase, desperate to reach the attic, thinking maybe she could find refuge in the familiar space. but the steps stretched impossibly, each one longer and narrower. The attic door swung open on its own, and hundreds of tiny ornaments poured out, spinning and crashing around her. One smashed against the wall, cracking like a sound of breaking bones. She could feel their tiny hands crawling up her legs, gripping her, dragging her toward the tree. The tree itself seemed to pulse. Ornaments dangled unnaturally, swinging with no breeze. Lights flickered in erratic patterns, casting glowing red shadows across the walls. The metallic scent grew stronger, filling her lungs. She coughed, gagged, but couldn't stop moving. The figurine's whispers turned into laughter, high-pitched and piercing, echoing inside her skull. Emma's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything to help her. A fireplace, the ladder, a window. Nothing was safe. Every surface seemed to host another miniature figure, another reflection of her twisted face. The chandelier overhead shook violently, dropping crystals that scattered like shards of ice, embedding themselves in the floor around her. Desperate, she clawed toward the staircase, willing herself to climb. But the house was alive now. The walls leaned in, floors rippled, shadows stretched, reaching for her. The figurines swarmed, crawling over her, their whispers merging into a singular deafening chant. Join us, join us, join us. With a final frantic effort, Emma lunged for the attic ladder. The figurines grabbed her ankles, their porcelain fingers cold, unyielding. She ripped free, climbing the ladder, her nails scraping against the wood, heart pounding, lungs burning. She reached the attic floor and slammed the door behind her. For a brief moment, silence reigned. Emma collapsed, gasping. The attic seemed normal again, or as normal as it had ever been. Dust motes danced in the dim light. Boxes lay scattered, but on the far shelf, one ornament had appeared, shiny, new, and unmistakably her likeness. Its eyes glimmered in the faint light. Its lips curled in that same hollow grin. She screamed again, but no sound came. The house groaned beneath her, whispering, laughing. And in that moment, Emma realized the truth. The house had claimed her. She was not alone. She had joined them. The ornaments in the attic, the reflections in the baubles, the shadows on the walls, they were all her now. By morning, her parents discovered the living room in chaos. Ornaments were shattered, figurines strewn across the floor. The staircase leading to the attic was locked, and no one could explain why. Emma was gone. The only evidence of her existence, a small ornament, suspended perfectly on the Christmas tree, her face frozen in hollow perfection, eyes staring at anyone who dared enter. The Harris family had arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon, the sky already heavy with snow. Laura tried to hide her unease as they unpacked. The cabin was charming, yes, but old. The kind of place that creaks and groans, where the walls feel too thin, the air too heavy. The children, Sophie and Max, were too excited to notice anything amiss. Their laughter echoed through the hallways as they explored every corner, touching every decoration, unaware of the oppressive chill lingering in the air. Daniel tried to start a fire in the old stone fireplace, but the logs refused to catch at first. Sparks flew and died. Each failed attempt seemed to make the house colder, darker. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with a slow, deliberate rhythm, like someone, or something, was testing the cabin's defenses. By the time the fire roared and the children were asleep upstairs, Laura couldn't shake her feeling of being watched. She stared at the windows, half expecting to see someone standing in the trees. And then she did. At first it was just a shadow, but as she focused, the shadow became a figure. Tall, unnaturally thin, face obscured by darkness. It stood at the edge of the clearing, motionless, observing. Laura gasped, but when she blinked, it was gone. Yet she could still feel it, a presence, heavy and deliberate, pressing in through the walls, through the air. She shook herself and tried to sleep, but the sound of footsteps upstairs made her stiffen. Sophie and Max were asleep, she had checked, but the creaking floorboards suggested someone, or something, was moving above her. She pressed her back against the wall, heart racing, straining to listen. Then came the whispers, low, distant at first, like the wind carrying voices, but then clearer, calling her name, repeating it, distorted, sinister. Daniel stirred. "Laura, are you okay?" She shook her head. "Someone's here. I heard them." He frowned, rolling over. "It's just the wind. The kids, they're fine." But they weren't. Around midnight, Sophie awoke, whispering that she saw someone in her room. Laura rushed in, heart pounding, to find the bed empty. For a brief moment, she saw a shadow slip past the door, vanishing into the hallway. Max was awake now too, shaking, pointing toward the window. Laura followed his gaze and froze. Another figure. Tall, thin, impossibly still, its arms stretched unnaturally, hands brushing the snow outside. Its face was blank, pale as frost, eyes black voids. The children screamed. Laura grabbed them, huddling together. Daniel bolted upright at the commotion. "Get the doors barricaded!" Laura shouted, panic surging. They moved furniture against the doors, sliding the couch in front of the living room window, stacking chairs against the back door. But the house itself seemed to resist them. Every time they moved a piece of furniture, it slid back into place, as if the cabin had a will of its own. The wind outside intensified. With it came a sound that chilled them to the bone. Hundreds of footsteps moving through the snow, circling the cabin, never slowing, never stopping, and the whispers, now distinct voices, echoed in their ears. They weren't calling names anymore. They were laughing, high-pitched, cruel, echoing from everywhere at once. Daniel tried to open a window to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The snow had piled higher than they realized, forming walls around the cabin. And then the figures began to appear elsewhere, in mirrors, in shadows cast by the flickering fireplace, in reflections of glass. They moved slowly at first, then faster, circling, stalking, always watching. Sophie whimpered, pointing toward the staircase. A long, thin arm appeared, stretching unnaturally from the upper hallway, reaching down toward them. Laura screamed and pulled the children back. Daniel grabbed a fire poker and swung, striking nothing but air. But the scratching sound followed, relentless, echoing through the cabin like hundreds of nails on wood. The figures multiplied. Shadows became bodies. Faces appeared in the windows, pale, hollow-eyed, grinning with impossible mouths. Whispers turned into chants. The house trembled. Floorboards cracked under unseen weight. The family huddled together in terror, clutching one another as the cabin seemed to breathe around them. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in a blur of fear. Every time they tried to leave, the doors wouldn't open. Every window led only to snow, endless snow, and dark figures circling silently, stalking their movements. Sophie screamed suddenly, pointing toward the living room. The fireplace flickered violently, and the fire blazed unnaturally. Within its glow, they saw dozens of pale figures emerging from the shadows. Arms long, faces twisted, eyes hollow. Daniel tried to fight them off, swinging and grabbing, but they passed through him like smoke, intangible yet suffocating. The whispers became voices. Hundreds of children laughing, crying, screaming, they merged into a deafening roar. Laura tried to grab the children and flee upstairs. The staircase stretched, elongated impossibly, each step pulling her down. Figures emerged from the walls now, sliding from the corners of the ceiling. Sophie and Max clung to her, but their small hands felt cold, almost frozen. Something touched Laura's shoulder, a pale, icy hand. She spun, seeing nothing, but the footprints in the snow outside told another story. Dozens of figures moving unnaturally, circling the cabin, disappearing, returning, always observing. By dawn, the snow stopped, the wind fell silent, the forest seemed dead, but the cabin remained. No doors ajar, no broken windows, nothing to explain the terror that had unfolded inside. Only the Harris family was gone. No tracks leading into the forest, no signs of struggle. Just the deep indentations of massive claw-like prints surrounding the cabin, disappearing into the woods. Locals say that the forest is cursed every Christmas Eve. Anyone staying in that cabin reports strange noises, distorted shadows, impossible reflections, and whispers in the wind. Some claim to see tall, thin figures lurking in the snow, watching from the trees. Others disappear completely, leaving only footprints, and the knowledge that whatever haunts the cabin claims its victims slowly, feeding on terror, waiting for the next family foolish enough to seek solitude on a snowy Christmas night. Christmas feels safe until you learn about the people who never made it to Christmas morning. Every year, terrifying things happen in the dark, and tonight, I'm going to show you what really hides behind the holiday cheer. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what you plan to do this December. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed true horror stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too.
This is the terrifying story of the Miller family. The Miller family had always prided themselves on Christmas. Every year, their house became a neighborhood spectacle. Strings of lights, glowing bulbs, and ornaments covered every visible surface. Children passing by pressed their noses against the windows in awe, and adults stopped to take pictures. But this Christmas was different. Something sinister had settled over the house, something that had been waiting. It began subtly. Emily had been adjusting the new set of lights along the roof when she noticed the flicker. One bulb pulsed faintly, unevenly, in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. She frowned. "That's odd," she murmured, tightening it. But when she stepped back, the glow of that single bulb seemed brighter, watching, as if aware of her presence. She shivered and climbed down the ladder, dismissing the sensation. Inside, the family prepared for dinner. Tom, her husband, noticed her unease. "Relax, it's just a bad bulb. We've got hundreds more, no big deal." Emily wanted to believe him, but the flicker persisted. Soon it wasn't subtle. The bulb pulsed brighter, faster, almost like a heartbeat. And then came the whispers. At first, they were soft, barely audible, riding on the wind. Emily froze. The whispers weren't coming from outside. They came from the lights themselves, from every bulb on the house reflecting inside the glass of the windows. Emily. Emily. Her heart pounded. She spun around, but the living room appeared empty. Tom was at the table helping the kids set their plates. The whispers grew louder, joined by a low, static hum, vibrating the very walls of the house. Emily felt a presence, watching, observing, pressing closer. By 10 p.m., the flickering had escalated. Every string of lights around the house pulsed, shifting independently, casting grotesque shadows across the walls. And then she saw them. Shapes, moving within the lights. Tall, thin, humanoid figures, with elongated limbs and featureless, pale faces. They twisted unnaturally, moving against gravity, crawling across rooftops, slipping across the snow. Emily's stomach turned, bile rising. She called to Tom,
but her voice sounded distorted, echoing unnaturally in the living room. He turned, concerned, and followed her gaze. For a brief moment, he saw it too, a figure stretching impossibly across the yard. But when he blinked, it vanished. The children began to cry, terrified. "Mom, Dad, they're watching us!" Sophie screamed, clutching Max. Emily grabbed him, hugging him tightly. The whispers became clearer. Words formed. "Watch. You can't hide." Panic set in. Tom ran to the front door to check the lock. It was fine, solid. But every time he glanced outside, the light seemed to twist into shapes. More humanoid forms, staring with blank faces, arms unnaturally long, moving independent of the decorations. The house itself seemed to shiver, walls bending subtly, as if the building were alive. Emily barricaded the doors with chairs and the couch. Tom tried to comfort the kids, but the lights now pulsed in rhythm with a heartbeat he could feel in his chest. Shadows across the room flickered and merged, forming grotesque faces that appeared in every reflective surface, the windows, the glass doors, even the TV screen. By 10 p.m., the family's fear had escalated into sheer terror. Outside, the lights writhed like living things. They bent down toward the snow, forming humanoid shapes that stepped from the yard, sliding across the surface silently. Emily watched in horror as the figures multiplied, circling the house, moving in impossible patterns. The whispers became chanting. Hundreds of voices merged into one deafening roar. The figures at the windows pressed against the glass, pale hands leaving streaks of frost and darkness. Emily grabbed the children and ran upstairs, hoping to hide in the bedrooms. But the lights followed, bending toward the windows of the second floor. The shapes were taller now, almost reaching the eaves of the roof, arms stretched unnaturally. Their heads twisted impossibly, eyes, if they had them, burning into Emily's soul. Sophie screamed as a shadow passed through the room, brushing her shoulder with cold, phantom fingers. Max sobbed, clinging to his mother. Tom tried to block the doorway with his body, but the shadow simply stretched, elongated, slipping past him like smoke. The house groaned, shaking, as if responding to some ancient command. Emily realized the truth. The lights weren't just decorations. They were watching, learning, and controlling the space around them. The air grew thick, heavy, smelling faintly of ozone and burnt wire. Each bulb pulsed brighter, faster, synchronized with the chant that now filled every corner of the house. Desperate, Emily grabbed a heavy flashlight and shined it at the shapes. For a brief moment they recoiled, twisting violently as if in pain. But then they merged again, forming a massive silhouette that blocked the windows on the second floor. The pulse of the lights became a strobe, disorienting, casting long, grotesque shadows. The chanting now had words. "Join us forever." Sophie and Max screamed. Emily tried to carry them, fleeing through the hallways, but the layout of the house had changed. Corridors twisted, doors led to nowhere. Staircases elongated. Each step they took was resisted by an unseen force. Tom tried to smash a window to escape, but the glass was impossibly thick, freezing solid. The figures outside pressed closer, standing among the yard decorations, bending unnatural angles, staring with blank, endless faces. The Christmas tree in the living room lifted off the ground, ornaments spinning like cyclones. Faces reflected in every bauble, twisted in silent screams. Emily realized with horror that she couldn't run, couldn't hide. The house itself had become a trap, a conduit for something ancient and malevolent. The lights pulsed, the shadows twisted, the chanting grew deafening. And then, in the center of it all, the first flickering bulb, the one that had started it all, glowed brighter than the sun.
From it emerged a shape taller than the house, limbs stretching into the night sky, arms twisting, head tilting in impossible angles. The family screamed as it reached toward them, the pulse of its heart resonating through every fiber of their being. Emily held the children close, praying. But the figures outside began climbing, sliding along the walls, pouring through every corner of the house, their blank faces pressing against every reflective surface. And then, silence. By morning, neighbors would later swear that the Miller house was perfectly lit, decorations in place, everything pristine. No signs of struggle, no footprints in the snow leading away. But inside, the family was gone. Only the lights remained, bright, pulsing, silent, watching. To this day, anyone who drives past the Miller house on Christmas Eve reports seeing figures in the yard, impossibly tall and thin, standing among the decorations. And if you stare too long at the flashing bulbs, they say you can hear whispers, calling your name, promising to watch, to wait, to take you. No one has ever seen the Millers again. The house waits, bright, decorated, and alive, waiting for the next family to admire its Christmas lights and step too close.